it takes several years, and sometimes even over a decade, to create a new, stunning, stable strain. You know, the blueberry, skunk number 1, or northern lights, they weren't created overnight. But you know how the old saying goes, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But guess what? The second best time is today. If you wonder how you could create your own strain someday, you're watching the right video. Let's talk about a few cannabis breeding concepts to better understand how these legendary strains were created. I promise, I will try to keep things as simple as possible. However, we'll have to go over a few basic breeding terms in order for us to understand what we're going to talk about in this video. Genotype. This is the genetic makeup of an organism. It describes an organism's entire set of genes. This is not something that you can directly observe. Phenotype, also known as pheno. A phenotype is the sum of all the physical characteristics based on genotype. That is what growers can observe with their own eyes. For instance, the size of the plants, the bud color, the leaf shape, and many other traits. Note that the same plant can express different phenotypes based on the environment or growing conditions. Alleles. The alternative versions of a given gene are called alleles. Most cannabis plants have 2 different versions of each gene. Heterozygous. That's having 2 different alleles of a particular gene or genes. Example, a plant that has 1 allele coding for broadleaves and 1 allele coding for narrow leaves. It can have broadleaves, or it can produce narrow leaves, or something that's going to be in between. Homozygous, having 2 identical alleles of a particular gene or genes. For instance, a plant that has 2 alleles coding for purple flowers will produce, guess what? Purple flowers. Now, before talking about the different methods you can use to stabilize a variety, let us ask, why do good breeders want to stabilize their strains in the first place? Let's imagine that you've won the prestigious High Times Cannabis Cup with a brand new strain. Then there's going to be many growers that are going to want to grow the same outstanding strain that you came up with, right? However, if that strain has not been properly stabilized, their chances of finding that same amazing plant from just a 10 pack of seeds are slim to none. In order to have uniformity among the offspring, it takes way more than just a one-off cross, also known as pollen chucking. Stability here refers to genetic stability. That is not to be confused with sexual stability. Sexual stability means having pure males and pure females without any hermaphrodites. That being said, sexual stability is also a crucial component. During the selection and stabilization process, plants must go through a lot of stress tests in order to reveal their hermaphroditic tendencies. Then breeders must call out all the hermes. How can a cannabis breeder stabilize a strain then? There are several different methods breeders resort to in order to stabilize their strains. The first method I'm going to talk about is selfing. Selfing is a method that consists of pollinating a plant with itself, usually a female plant. To do so, a breeder has to make a female produce male flowers, reverse a branch of a plant by spraying colloidal silver or silver thiosulfate, STS. He or she has to then collect the female pollen from that plant that has been reversed and pollinate the other branches of that same plant. Each self-generation leads to an increase in characteristics by 50%. In other words, each time you self-plant, the genetic stability, homozygosity will increase by 50%. Selfing a cannabis plant is actually the fastest way to stabilize a strain. But be careful, it is also the fastest way to lose vigor. Now let's talk about backcrossing. Backcrossing consists of crossing a plant with one of its parents, the recurrent parent, meaning that a chosen plant among the offspring will have to be crossed back with that same parent each time. You can do it many times. By doing so, breeders can achieve offspring with a similar genetic identity to that of the chosen parent, the recurrent parent, meaning it will look like the parent that he had at the beginning. This is exactly how the breeder, Mr. Soul, created the famous Cinderella 99, the Cindy 99. That's a very famous strain from back in the day. He used an outstanding jackhair plant as the recurrent parent. The advantage of backcrossing is that, unlike the selfing method, you can still work with both male plants and female plants at the same time. Now we'll talk about the old school method, line breeding or inbred lines. An inbred line, inbred lines, also known as IBLs, are strains that breed true for a certain number of traits. A true breeding strain will have only one main phenotype without much variation. IBL plants also have a uniform genotype. To create a true breeding strain, cannabis breeders have a specific list of traits they are after. Then they work with large populations of plants in order to find plants that would express these traits. Once the breeder has found a male and a female, or two females if you're working a feminized line, that match his criteria, he will make seeds with it. Then the same process starts all over again with the offspring. It takes several generations to create a true breeding strain. Generally, at least 5, sometimes way more, can be 10, 12. However, you cannot focus on too many traits at the same time because it is very unlikely to find several specimens expressing the same group of traits. It's like winning the lottery, The bigger the population a breeder works with, the more traits he or she can focus on at once. Although breeding requires a lot of skills and knowledge, it is also a numbers game. Some landraces are almost true breeding because they have been selected by farmers for certain specific qualities over many generations. You can create a very stable line by inbreeding your plants, thus creating an inbred line. To create an IBL, inbred line, one must keep records and call out all the plants which do not match his list of criterions. Regular IBLs versus feminized IBLs. Cannabis breeding is often a slow process, but line breeding is much faster and yields great results when working with female plants only. Line breeding using both male and female plants is way trickier for two main reasons. It is often hard to know what female attributes a male can pass on. The best way to know that is to actually grow the offspring of that male, but that's very time consuming and we have to do it with all the males that you have. Then reason number 2, male plants do not term hermaphrodite as easily as female plants. For that reason, it is much harder to stress test them. Line breeding for many generations leads to the creation of new IBL strains. The skunk number 1, for example, is one of the most famous IBL strains. You can also cross 2 distinctly different IBLs to produce a new uniform phenotype, also known as a true F1 hybrid. True F1 hybrids. Many plant breeders and expert growers see true F1s as the holy grail of breeding. True F1s are sought after because they're both very uniform and highly vigorous. True F1s are the result of a cross between two stable lines, two different IBLs that are genetically very different from each other. Despite the fact that both parents are very different, the offspring will look very stable, very uniform. Because each parent is highly homozygous, it passes on the same version of gene to its offspring. That is why all the true F1 plants will have almost the same combination of genes. That explains why true F1s are very uniform even if they are heterozygous. Furthermore, true F1s are more vigorous than either parent because the principle of heterosis, hybrid vigor. Having two different alleles for each gene is what causes that incredible hybrid vigor. F1 hybrids. Just like true F1s, F1s are the offspring of two genetically different plants. However, unlike true F1s, the parents of an F1 do not have to be genetically stable. They do not have to be IBLs for making an F1. Unlike true F1s that are created using two very stable lines, F1s are often very unstable because their parents are not homozygous but heterozygous. As a result, there will be many different combinations of genes among the offspring. Although F1s are generally very vigorous, there won't be one main pheno, but there's going to be many different phenos. When we talk about pollen chuck-in, that's what we refer to. We refer to the creation of F1 hybrids. These are your typical one-off crosses. Now, let's talk about F2 hybrids. F2s are the results of a combination of two F1s. These are the most unstable of all hybrids. Nonetheless, that incredible genetic diversity can be very interesting for phenohunters or breeders that are looking for a standout specimen. Now, it's not a method, but it's something that can happen as a result of something negative. Inbreeding depression. When creating a true breeding strain, plant vigor sometimes decreases to the point where breeders have to either backcross or go back one or several generations in order to regain some vigor. That is because when plants become too heavily inbred, they become genetically weak and they grow much slower. By the same token, genetically weak plants can develop undesirable mutations. Selfing a cannabis plant is the fastest way to stabilize a strain, but it is also the fastest way leading to inbreeding depression. By now, we know that plant breeding is very time-consuming and involves working with large plant populations. That being said, would it be possible for a home breeder to achieve great results? While it is true that professional cannabis breeders are more likely to create good, stable strains, home breeders can definitely create new, exceptional varieties as well. As I said before, cannabis breeding doesn't just take skills and knowledge, but it is also a numbers game. And for that reason, home breeders should ideally focus on only one line at a time, I would say. They should optimize their grow space as well and use small containers in order to maximize the number of plants that they have. With the right experience, a lot of discipline, and a great deal of patience, home breeders can also obtain amazing results. The world of cannabis breeding is full of surprises, and anyone with a solid breeding strategy has the potential to create the next skunk number one. Yeah, if creating a new strain seems daunting to you, you know what? Do not be afraid. Take it step by step and be patient. Good luck with your future breeding endeavor. And if you guys want to see more of it, please help the channel, subscribe to the channel. Have a great day. See you guys soon. Peace.